My name is Fatos Hoti. I work as a software developer at Degordian. We are using Yi as our preferred framework for development. Currently in production we have Yi 1.114, I think, but we are in the process of transferring to Yi 2 at this point, so this is some of the things that we found out during that process. First of all, has anyone used Yi here? Okay, so the majority. Yi 2? Anyone transferred yet? Okay, this will be fun then. So basically a little bit of history. This is all semi-important. The most important things here are just to see that the first version was developed in under a year and the second one took around 3.5 years. So you can just get the grasp on thing, just how large this rewrite is. So what's old in the framework? We still have very good structure. In my opinion, excellent one. It's still MVC, it still has an amazing extension system, it still comes coupled with large sets of widgets, and it's highly extendable. So everything is a component, you extend a component, de facto then you extend the framework. What's new? I'll be talking about all of these things later, so just bear with me. So the PHP requirements have changed. It's installable via Composer. All classes have been namespaced and now have fully qualified namespace names. He introduces something called Aliases. The active record has been changed and rewritten. The core extensions that now come as part of the framework have been more powerful, and there's more of them. The Restful API development has been simplified. The translator has improved significantly in the second version. We have a more powerful, better looking Yi. We have integrated conception and a really nice set of asset management, debugging and migration tools. And last but not the least, we have something called application templates, which I will show at the end of the presentation. So the minimum requirement for Yi 2 is PHP 5.3.8, and with that you get this beautiful set, which is a quite larger one. This is just something that I wrote down. You can use all of this now as your core functionalities in your framework. So it's installable via Composer, which is quite a lifesaver compared to Yi 1. And by just executing a couple of these Composer commands, you can have a running boilerplate application in a matter of 5 to 7 minutes. It took me, when I was starting with Yi 1, it took me around half an hour to 45 minutes to set the initial application, and with Yi 2 it took me around 5 to 6 minutes, so you can imagine what an improvement that is. So framework looks something like this when you pull it from GitHub. The majority of files is located in the Yi 2 YiSoft folder, and here you can see this finely granulated structure of the framework. Application structure is the same as it is in the majority of popular frameworks now. So you have an entry script, which at the end executes the application, which is consisted of different components like controls, filters, views, models, and so on. Extension system, this is something that attracted me to Yi from the get-go. So today is like 7 months since Yi was released, and at this point there are almost 150 extensions on yiframework.com and over 400 at Yigist, which is the packages repo for Yi 2. You can just imagine in that short time so many extensions have been created by outside developers that are not members of the core team. So you can see that the community is working really fast and it's really growing. So here are just a couple of interesting ones that I found. Something like infinite scroll, array search, high charts, WordPress. They're all installable via Composer, and by default they end up in the vendor folder. So namespaces, as I said, Yi introduced something called namespaces, and these are just the basic ones. So we have the core one, we have the namespace holding the JS and CSS files, we have the base component namespace, which holds all the base components which are at the end extended by higher classes. The DB holds all classes that are related to database manipulation, like active record connection and stuff like that. Data holds all classes related to data manipulation. Grid is a separate namespace which now holds the widget known as grid view. And all its subcomponents. In the widgets one, we have all those fine little widgets that make a life easier when we are developing with E. Helpers, which are all your day-to-day helpers. Web, which holds all the stuff that it's important to web applications, like Application Asset Manager. Here, I just want to mention this. They put the user class in the web namespace. For me, that I wouldn't do it that way. I would make a separate namespace called authentication or something like that and put it there. For me, this is not a good practice, but they did it that way, so they must know why they did it. Validators holds all the core validators that come with Ye. Behaviors is now, since all you know Ye, I don't have to explain what behaviors are. So Ye now comes with 4 core ones, like timestamp, sluggable, blamable, and attribute, I think. REST is connected with all the Restful API development. Filters is for access control, caching is for caching, log, and internationalization. So aliases, so as I understood, aliases should be something like global variables, but they're not. So there's variables that are accessible from any part of your application, and Ye, once installed, comes with these predefined aliases for framework directory, base path, runtime, composer, the location of your index.php or your entry script, the base URL, bower, and npm. And as you might know, you can define your own aliases by editing the config file. So models, not much has changed here, but a couple of things that have been added really simplifies development and makes your life easier. So it still supports scenario-based data validation. It introduces something called detection of dirty attributes, which you can use to detect any changed attributes on your, let's say, forms or models. It implements the arrayable interface, which can be a pretty useful, neat tool if you're handling a large sets and large amounts of data and you want to preserve your memory and make things go faster. It supports massive attribute assignment, which was supported in U1 as well, but the syntax has been changed and I didn't know what the crowd is going to be, so I wanted to mention it. And lastly, it's extended by the active record class. So what does it look like in code? So we can see here that we have this pretty little method that says get dirty attributes, which in the end returns all the changed attributes in your current request. You can query if a certain attribute has been changed, you can force it, and you can still get the old attributes that were present before your, let's say, post request. It implements arrayable, which at the end means that you can call this function toArray, which returns by default your default set of attributes that you defined in your model. By editing the extra fields function method, you can add extra fields that you want to export it into array via that method. So the active record has gone through quite of a major rewrite. So the first thing that takes out that you don't have to instantiate the model to do queries anymore. So queries have been transferred in the active record domain, and for me it makes more sense that it's that way. So it makes no sense for you to have the base model that's in charge for data manipulation and the querying as well. Some of the functions have been obsoleted. So the find by primary key, find by attributes have been changed with shorthands find one and find. The CDB criteria class is gone. It's no longer used and it's been replaced by a more powerful one, active query. And one big difference is that the relations method has been changed. So you don't have to define your relations explicitly. You can just use a getter function for it to get your related models. It has a better search syntax. It's more logical, in my opinion, now. You can do these neat things like finder merging and adding conditions on the fly. And the neat little thing that has been added has been this batch loading. The last thing that I've written down here for me is the major improvement in the active record class. So it stands as an interface for all your data sources. So imagine a situation when you want to transfer your data source from, I don't know, classic MySQL to Sphinx. If your data structure hasn't been changed much or at all you need to do is change the namespace of the active record class you're extending. And you're good to go. So you change the data source, you edited your config file, and basically just change your namespace, and that's all you have to do for core changes in your code. So what does it look like in code? As I said, it has a better search syntax. So if someone was here who has seen the Yi for the first time, he would understand what is written here. So get me all posts with this status, get me one where ID equals that, get me a Scholar query, get me an indexed by query. I haven't done this, to be honest, so I don't know what the performance issues are here with this query. You would have to check that for yourself. And you can do the old-fashioned way by just injecting the SQL in it. So this is what I was talking about, the relations. So now you get the opportunity to explicitly define when you want to get the related models. So before you could do that, but you would define it before using it. So now you have the option to use it whenever you want, and you define how you want to get the related models. So this would be an example of how to get it via the lazy load method. So basically you instantiate the object, and afterwards you get the related models. In the last one, you can see that this is done through, let's say, an eager method where you get all the data and all the related data in one query. You can export it as an array, which at the end also helps you with memory management and large sets of data. And a good little thing is this batch loading. So what this does is takes your result set and batches it and returns an array of arrays in batch of 10, which you can then iterate through, which can really help you in situations where you have, I don't know, 10 million records or something like that. Transactions have also changed. Now you have the opportunity to define what sort of statements are transactional in which scenario. So this at the end means that you can write your code, and if you define a certain statement in a certain scenario as a transactional one, you don't have to explicitly check if a transaction already exists and it's open. If it's not open, it will implicitly be open, and if it's already open, it would implicitly be pushed in that same transaction that it's active at that point. So behaviors, I wanted to explain this because the syntax had changed a little bit, but it still holds the great thing that the behaviors are in Yi. Conception now comes integrated. I haven't used it myself, but I have read a couple of articles from people that have used it, and they said it is a major help. And as it comes integrated, when I say integrated, not full, it's integrated as a core extension. It sort of makes you write tests from the get-go. And I'm certain that everybody writes tests here, so it should be quite a help. Restful API development has been simplified to, let's say, a ridiculous level, because all you need to do is edit your config file and define your rule as a REST rule, and define your path to your active controller class, which at the end extends the REST active controller class, and all you need to do inside that class is reference the object that you are using in your API, and internally it makes all the CRUD operations accessible to you with all the headers set and all the response code set. Translator has also improved, and when I say improved, I mean especially in the matter of formatting. So I like this example here a lot. This is something that was accessible in E1 as well. But let's say this example here. I really like this. So depending on your input, your output will change. And that's something that was really necessary, because Imagine Creation language is a specific one with all that stuff, with all its specialities. I don't know how to translate them at this point. But depending on your input and what you put in to your, let's say, statement, you get a different output, which is pretty nice to imagine that you can cover all those scenarios like that. G, so everybody has used it, and everybody knows that comparing to the old one, this looks like a spaceship. So at the end, it's a lot nicer to look at, firstly. It comes with a little bit more than that. So I really like this feature here. So enable internationalization. So what it in the end means that all your attribute labels will be wrapped in the translate function. And even if you don't have a multilingual site, you can hope that it will one day become one, and while generating your CRUDs and modals, you can enable that. You can, while generating CRUD now, you can generate the search model class, which at the end extends your base model, and you can make your query manipulation there without the need of regenerating the whole thing once again. It comes with an extension generator, which is pretty good, because now all the extensions that have been created through the generator will have the same structure, the same know-how, and it's in the end better, because when you use an extension as a developer, you will know where to look for a certain thing if something is missing or it's buggy or something like that. And there's tooltips here. What I like about them, because when I was starting, I just hover over them and see what the input should be and what the output will be. And for someone just starting with a framework, I think that's a great way to beat the learning curve and just go faster in developing what's important. Core extensions, and there are a bunch of them now, so I just put a few of them here. I really like that it comes with the Redis extension, Elasticsearch, Codeception, and Faker, Sphinx. And it's great to imagine that you have the support of the framework no matter what your project looks like. So you can integrate any kind of third-party technology with no problem at all, and you have the basis for handling all that. I think that this is one of the major improvements and major key factors in E, that it's so humongous now that you practically can do anything from just one framework. You don't have to integrate a million different things for it to work. One of those examples is the asset management tool. Currently in our development department, we are divided in the back-end development and the front-end development. So the front-end developers use Grunt as an task manager and watcher. And while the time we spent on adjusting everyone's machine to work with Grunt and to be able to support stuff like that was precious. We lost a lot of it. So just imagine that you can do anything inside all that inside your framework. So you have one tool for the job, and you don't have to again integrate a bunch of other things for you to have the same end result. So you have the option to compress and so minify and uglify your files, and you can have the buster function with just one simple command in your config file, and that's the pen timestamp equals true. And you can have your converter task, which at the end can convert your less files into compiled CSS files. It's not as powerful as Grunt. It will not watch over your files and detect changes, but it can help you if you don't want to integrate all that. This was, I think, picked up from Symfony, from what I've heard. So the Debugging Console. It's as simple as adding a /debug on your URL, and you will get a view that looks like this. and it's composed from 7 different tabs. So in the configuration one, we can find all the things that are connected with Apache, PHP, your core extensions, your app config. In the request one, we can find and see what are your get, post, server, session variables that you are using in your current request. Log at the end, depending on your trace setting, will display all that was logged for that application. Profiling will provide you with your profiling information, and database will provide you with the explanation of your database queries with timings and stuff like that. And asset bundles will show what sorts of assets you are using in your request at that point. So all the JS and CSS files that have been included there. I haven't used this one, but a colleague of mine has told me that it serves as a helper if you're using the Swift mailer extension. There you can check all your headers, bodies, and all that's connected with your email sending and receiving. This is a great tool, and I really like that almost every tutorial now and application template starts with your init your application, then you do the migrate. It comes with a nice set of commands, but that's all good, but I really like this one. So yeah, so migrating from one database to another. That's an amazing tool to have when you have to, you can imagine the situation where you have to migrate your database from your local host to your production server or another server, stuff like that. It's amazing to see that you don't have to export a bunch of files, then import them through another client and stuff like that. I know, this is a pretty powerful tool and I like it quite a lot. What it looks like. Basically, when you create a migration file, it will by default be created in your migrations folder, and you can create these neat little functions which uses as up and down. Basically, one is go up, one is go down, so create, delete. So you can have a create table function, you can have an insert if you have some lookup values that you need inserting in the database and you want them to be transferred in the migration. And you can have every migration file needs an up and a down method. So you have to have the ability to undo and redo stuff that you did, and this is pretty accessible too. So what I like about this is that this is at the end a PHP file, which can be pushed to Git and which can be reused afterwards from all developers that are included in your project or whoever you want to. So it's the first time that I saw that a database versioning tool can be good. But one little thing here is you have to go against your habit. So everyone that starts developing their database, the first thing they do is go to their SQL client and starts writing their create table statement through this or any other interface. So you have to go against your habit, but if you do that, you won't regret it. And at the end, application templates. This is more of a composer feature than it is a Yi one, but Yi implements it real well from my point of view. So in a lot of tutorials that are available on the internet now, you will see a lot of people referencing themselves to either the basic one or the advanced one, and they have done all the modifications on either one or the other application template. So basically with a basic one you get a basic structure for a simple website. In the advanced one, they changed up a little bit things. Now they want to introduce that everything is a special app. So if you have an admin to your website, it should be a special app. If you have a console part of your application, it should be a special app. In E1, you could do that, but the tendency was to write modules. So for me this is better because you can divide it, you can share configs still, so you don't have to duplicate your code in that fashion. But for me it's a really nice way to, if you're new to Yi, to start with this, you will get a nice set of code which you can investigate and reuse and use. This is a quite interesting application template that I found. It has been written by one of the core developers of Yi, and it basically sets up a small web shop in a matter of, I don't know, 5-6 minutes. How much does the composer need? And now I just want to mention this. I'll move here. This is stuff that I didn't have time to explain, but I want to mention. Security. So you get a nice set of password manipulation methods that you can use for your security things. Template engines can be integrated very easily by editing your view component and just saying what kind of template engine are you using, either being Smart or Twig, which are integrated as core exceptions. Events are still available, so basically you define an event listener, you trigger the event, and the callback gets executed. And a service locator function class that basically means that you can define any component in your application as a service, register it, and afterwards you can use it by getting it from any part of your application. And the query builder has gone through a bit of change as well, so the search syntax has also been improved. You can now write SQL statements inside your query. You can add them you can add conditions on the fly, which was available also in Yi1. But what I like here is this part. So you can insert a subquery as your query parameter. So I was now doing something similar just today, and you have to, the idea is in Yi1 that you have to compose an SQL query, which you then put as a parameter. You can't do it explicitly like this, which is a huge help. Upgrading, as I said, I wouldn't do it, but if you want to, you have 2 great articles that you can investigate. They have been written by the core developers in Yi. You all know, but I want to mention it as anyways. Don't imagine that you can just plug in Yi2 and leave your code and that it will work. It won't. And a couple of useful links. So read the guidebook, it's amazing. It has been written excellently. You have a bunch of examples that you can learn from. Cookbook is still under development, and once it's finished it will be excellent. This guy here has written, I don't know, around 40 extensions for Yi2 at this point. So you can check him out. He really does neat things. And this is a page called yifeed.com, which serves all the latest news about Yi framework in almost real time. So I imagine because everyone is using Yi that a short demo will not be important, will be necessary. So are there any questions?
PSR compliance?
PSR 1. One more thing that I want to say that I forgot about Codeception is that all the tests for the framework have been written in Codeception, so you can imagine that it's pretty well integrated in the framework. Okay, shall we call it quits? Okay.